Dead.
They record it?
over the island.
Hello, Rita and Brent. Can you folks hear us okay?
I hear you just fine.
Rita, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Madam Mayor.
And I can hear you just fine as well. I just had to find my unmute button. I'm on a strange computer this evening. And Rita, your kitty always looks so comfy.
She loves these meetings. She's enthralled by city government. She just can't wait for the first Wednesday of every month.
That's
She
so
just
funny.
hops up here and says, let's get going.
There are two resolutions. Do we want to read the whole thing, or is it just the signature? Is that what you were trying to imply, that we could just name the title of it
Yeah.
and
Make a motion to approve
the resolution,
the
the
proclamation,
proclamation? Okay,
and then that's all I have. Yeah, I'll sign it.
sign it tomorrow or today?
No, I think we have.
I have them.
So sign them after.
Yeah, we can if you have time.
Good evening, Counselor Smith. You can hear us okay?
I believe so.
All right, good. We're trying again for the second time a new microwave or microphone setup. So let us know how it goes.
I will.
Hi, Carrie.
Rita, Brent,
Hello there.
Scott.
Yes, so what is the new microphone situation? And it does sound much better.
It's a satellite microphone that plugs into the back of the system and extends rather than just a microphone that's up there on the television. It's this little one right here.
Oh, only one. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it turns out that that's all I can plug into the bottom, but it should work fine. In the future, we can put it in the middle of the tables so that all of us can have a better reception.
Yeah. I've seen those similar mics anyhow that are kind of daisy chained, so you can have 5 or 6 of them all hooked into the same place and then distribute the mics around the desk.
Yeah, I think unfortunately this system only allows one, but I got some more looking into it.
Dan just rolled in.
Yeah, but a vast improvement.
Good. As long as you don't get me here just clicking my pen over and over and over again. I got rid of the pen clicker. Good morning.
Oh, that
Counselor Dan is here.
Yeah, that's why the individual mics with a on-off switch for each would be the ideal solution. Then you don't hear the clicks of the pen and things like that.
Peter, you've got an interesting handle on the screen.
I know. I let somebody borrow my computer and I've been their name ever since. So I get to rename myself. I should be smart enough to figure this out, but it hasn't happened yet.
Well, you got it now. That was good, though.
All right, well, we might as well go. All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the October 6, 2021 City Council meeting to order for the city of Gerhart. And is there any declaration of conflict of interest any of the councilors need to discuss or talk about, disclose?
Not me.
No,
Not that I know of, but we'll learn more later.
Okay. And I also have none. Then approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on September 1st, 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
Madam Mayor, I have two corrections. Page 2 in my report talking about the conversation with Representative Bonamici's office. Bonamici does not have an H in it. Italians have just CI for ch. And so there's two locations in that paragraph that have it misspelled. And then on page 4, down at the bottom, second to the last paragraph, I think it would be much more accurate if that second to the last sentence was moved after the last sentence. So it would read, Attorney Watts felt there would likely be no violation with Ethics Commission since the noise ordinance is a community-wide issue and Councillor Warren has no financial gain in the decision.
All right, thank you. There's been a motion to approve the minutes with 2 corrections. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
nope,
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is the Planning Commission report. Planning Commission President Virginia Dedham sent us a letter dated September 24th about Planning Commission meeting on September 9th. Any comments?
Madam Mayor, I have a comment. In her report, she says there was a discussion about the chimneys used to conceal the Verizon towers. Where would the location of these false chimneys be?
Those chimneys are on top of the new building. There's 2 chimneys. They're even painted to look like they've been used with a little bit of dark paint. And they house the electronics inside them on the roof. So you can't see anything of the electronics at all.
So what new building?
This is the McMinimans Hotel
Okay,
portion that was built maybe 2 years ago.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I am curious what the letter of correspondence from Mr. Maury to the planning commission was.
From last month's meeting?
From September 9th.
Yeah, I can look that up here on my computer and I'll find out for you.
Okay.
Wasn't that his withdrawal of his conditional use permit?
That was the month before.
Oh,
So we'll get that together for review. Moving on to the mayor's report, I wrote one out, so I'm going to read it briefly. This month, I had my first coffee with the mayor. We had about 20 attendees. Some of the topics we discussed included answering questions about the new proposed fire station location and project, a request to start curbside recycling of compost and green waste. And there were a couple of questions about the school, and Mr. Morey was there and helped answer some of those. There were a couple other discussion items as well. I want to give my thanks to our city attorney, Peter Watts, for his efforts with the recent bond measure title and wording for the proposed new fire station. Although the petitioners were successful in denying the voters of Gerhart an opportunity to vote this November, they were not successful in their ballot title challenge. Communication to the voters is an important goal for myself and for the city. I would note that the City of Gerhart website and the blog are our official communication channels for the city. And I will be working with staff to ensure that we are continually improving the blog and blogging important information for our residents. We have at least 1,100 people currently getting the email notifications of any official posts by the city. And I would like to see even more residents sign up for this service. I would ask residents to use critical thinking on some of the social media posts, as misinformation is also readily available from some of the Facebook groups. We continue to work on finding the right vendor for the children's play area across the street at the park. Council reports, Carrie Smith.
I have none at this time.
Mr. Warren.
Sure. Jenny Frank, the chair of the Small Business Committee, is working with Andrew Stein and Dolores Sullivan, who is a psychologist, has a business in downtown Gerhart. And they're working at getting a business association started, working to get their first meeting and publicity going on that. As you may recall, that came out of our Small Business Committee's survey process, where quite a few people suggested either a small business association or chamber of commerce get started to help our businesses. Let's see, I've been working on researching getting a new zip code. We'll be talking more about that in the meeting. Also created a new Facebook group entitled Gerhart Fire Station Discussion to share information about the fire station. I wrote a guest column for the Astorian Signal. Don't know exactly where it's going to be, but should be coming out shortly. And I do want to preempt some future criticism by saying I did not write as a counselor for the city of Gerhart. I wrote as an individual citizen resident. So hope that will avoid controversy. And that's about it.
Thank you, Brent. And Dan?
I have none.
And Rita?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Brent, I think that was posted in the Seaside Signal. That's where I saw it. But other than if I have anything to report at this time, I do not.
Thank you. Thank you all. And city officer reports, Chief of Police.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have a whole lot really. We received our audit from DPSST every year. They audit every police department in the state of Oregon on employment certification and training issues. And again, we didn't have any of those in either of those three categories. So we get our gold star and we can move on to the next year. Our hiring process. August 16th, with the company NTN, we opened up the position for the third police officer. On September 20th at midnight, it closed. We had 10 people that actually showed an interest in our opening. We had 4 that submitted applications. And out of those 4, when I checked for test scores, one of them didn't even bother to take the test. So we are down to 3. I scheduled the ORPAT testing, which is the Oregon Physical Abilities Test, for October 9th. And we were going to have it at Seaside High School. Officer Brown, I sent him down last week to be certified in being able to be an instructor to run that test. Well, the Sheriff's Department, they wanted the ORPAT trailer too on October 9th. So we joined with them. And on October 9th at 7 a.m., they're going to be holding the tests, and it'll be joint for all the departments in the county. It looks right now, I had another applicant out of the 3 that called me up, and he just been, his unit in the National Guard has been activated for a year. So he dropped out. Another applicant said that he had a wedding on October 9th, and he may or may not be here. So we'll find out October 9th. If he doesn't show up, then we're down to 1. I've already scheduled him for oral interviews on October 22nd, as he's already passed the ORPAT testing twice this year. So I accepted those so he wouldn't have to drive down here for that. So what we're looking at is October 22nd, we're going to have oral interviews with him at 10 a.m. Chad's going to be on the interview board, Sergeant Brown and myself. The next week after October 22nd, which is basically, the 25th through the 29th, if we decide that this applicant does really well in skills, we're going to be into the background stage on this individual. That week, the 25th through the 29th, we're going to start sending out letters to places that he's listed as references and other employments. During that week, I'm also going to be sending him a letter asking him to submit not sign-ins or passwords, but all the social medias that he's on and any other affiliated groups that he may belong to. We'll do the initial background on him. The first week of November will be Sergeant Brown will actually pay a visit to his hometown, and we'll conduct interviews there in person with people. And then I'm looking at and if he gets past the background, I'm looking at November 17th. We'll have a special meeting with the council. The council can, if they so choose, offer a conditional offer to him of employment. The month of December, he'll need to do his physical, which is a full physical, hearing, eyesight, and he has to pass 2 psychological tests. And if he passes those, hopefully we'll have a hire in January of 2022. And that's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much for that thorough report. Does anybody have any questions for Chief Bowman from the council?
No, great information though, Chief.
Thank you.
And before we move on to interim fire chief, I just want to say, I forgot at the beginning of the meeting, if you are a visitor listening in and you would like to have a chance to speak during the visitor section, please email chadsweet@cityofgerhart.com. And with that announcement, Josh Como, do you have a report?
I do have a report. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and Mr. Sweet. Along with me tonight, I have Mr. Laird here, who is the president of our Gerhart Firefighters Association. And so at the end of my report, he'll be here if anybody has any questions pertaining to the association matters or anything like that. He kind of wanted to offer himself being here tonight and supporting that if anybody had any questions for him. Continuing with my report, last month we had a total of 54 calls, and we ended on call number 515. Last year, 2020, at the end of September, we were on call 377, so we are still 138 calls ahead of last year. Last month's call breakdown is as, was there a question?
No, go ahead.
Last month's call breakdown is as follows. Those 54 calls, 33 of them was inside city limits and 41 was in our fire protection district. We received aid one time from Seaside, and I'll expand on that in a moment. We sent aid, we provided aid to Seaside 5 times. We sent aid to Lewis and Clark once, and aid to Oregon State Fire Marshal's office for a wildland mobilization of the Cougar Peak Fire in Lakeview, Oregon once last week. The call we received mutual aid for was a water rescue call for in the ocean. I want to discuss a couple of things about this call. We respond to calls on the beach because it is in our coverage district. It may not be in the city limits, but it is in our coverage area. We are not going to not respond to a call for help. If someone's in danger and we can do something about it, it would be wrong for us to ignore it. We receive aid during water rescue calls for a couple of reasons. Currently, the protocol is for the entire county is that Seaside comes to their areas with water rescue equipment and trained personnel. They handle the scene operationally while we provide ground support, lookout, and radio communications. We now have at Gerhart the much needed equipment to perform these water rescues, and our training is almost finished, which will allow us to actually enter the ocean for rescues moving forward in the near future. In the near future, we'll be the main agency handling water rescues in Gerhart, and Seaside will still come as they are more complex with rescue capabilities. We will be the main support in with that though. Another agency that comes, water rescue, is Coast Guard, that responds to all these types of calls. They'll continue coming moving forward. For Coast Guard, it takes them at least 20 minutes to get just airborne after their call is received for help, if they're not already in the air and happen to be in our area. Coast Guard Sector Columbia River, so just the Coast Guard for our area, base station assigned to us, provides coverage for almost 900 square miles. So Sector Columbia River and Astoria, they provide 900 square mile coverage. They cannot be the sole entity taking care of these calls. Being how it takes them longer to arrive on scene, Coast Guard's usually called right away, or even before we arrive on scene. One reason is because of the response time. The majority of the time, about 95% of the time, just like with what happened with our water rescue call last month, we have the victim out of the water before Coast Guard even arrived on scene. Time is extremely important when it comes to survivability with water rescues, so response, locating the victim, and rescue needs to happen very quickly, and I hope that that helps clear up some confusion about those types of calls. Is there any questions specifically about water rescue?
Any questions?
Perfect. So last month, there was a letter sent into the Daily Historian by Mr. Zimmerman that I wanted to address a couple of things from. In the letter, it addressed a regional training and response headquarters at Camp Raylia. I wanted to state there's nothing like that at Camp Raylia. What they have there is an auxiliary communications building, which houses communication equipment primarily used for ham radio operations. Even when we use Camp Raylia as grounds for training events, we don't even use the AUXCOM, which is short for auxiliary communications building. Our communications go straight from our radios to who we're communicating with. Is there any questions about communications in Camp Raylia? So the letter also stated a question about water rescues, and I hope that I handled that just by talking about the last call we had last month with the Coast Guard and other aid from agencies. Further on in the letter, I talked about Gearhart being a small community with no fires. So last year, I pulled some numbers, and this was the grant information we even sent to FEMA for how we got grants last year. In 2020, we had a total of 507 calls for service. Out of those calls, 293 of them were for in-home medical calls. So about 55% of our calls are just in-home medical. 62 of the calls were fires alone. 30 of those 62 calls were structure fires and 13 were wildland fires. The rest of those were like little campfires on the beach we had to put out or what have you. 49 of the calls were motor vehicle accidents. The rest of the 507 calls were like smoke complaints or smoke detectors, good intent calls, or other rescues related to weather related or what have you. Does anybody have any questions about our calls from last year? So the letter also stated that most medical calls needed no more than an ambulance ride into Seaside. We are actually on scene about 95% of the times before medics. We provide life-saving measures before medics is even there. Because of the equipment and the training we have saved multiple lives. This includes 2 of which our Lucas device saved, in which the person was in cardiac arrest and coded, which was purchased with a grant from Lighthouse Christian Church. On scenes, we continue to provide aid support during the calls while medics is on scene. Then there are numerous times we will ride in with medics, continue to provide support and on the ambulance ride to the hospital, whether it be with life-saving efforts like CPR, or anytime medics personnel needs extra hands handling a call, handling a person. The letter stated that 2 miles away. Was there a question?
No.
No.
Well, the letter stated that homes 2 miles away from a fire station will not be covered by most insurance companies. So home insurance companies will not deny insurance. Home insurance companies base their home premium rates off of ISO ratings. As I have discussed in previous reports, Gearhart has an ISO class 3 or C rating, and that's a 3 or C depending on which insurance companies you use. Some use numerical, some use numbers ratings with that. 10 being the worst and 1 being the best. That class 3 or C rating is because of multiple things. I went into much detail in that in my last report. I'll just highlight a couple. We have a class 3 rating because of how many volunteers we have, because of the certain certifications our volunteers carry, because the apparatus and the equipment we have, because of how much mobile water we have or how much water we carry in our apparatus, how far your homes are away from hydrants. The only concern ISO has the distance from a fire station that they're concerned about is anything over 5 miles that will drop our ISO rating. That distance then is how the road drives. It's not how the crow flies. So you have to make sure, like you go on Google Maps and measure distance. Downtown Gearhart is 2.14 miles away from the proposed location. So that location should not have any effect on the ISO ratings, making your home insurance premiums any worse. Are there any questions about ISO ratings? The letter also stated that the Highlands location will not be any better in a tsunami than our current location. Based off of site elevation alone, it is apparent that our equipment will be much safer at the Highlands location, which is notably higher. If we were to stay at our current location, there's a much higher probability that our equipment will be underwater, and it's not just water, it's salt water and sand. The equipment will not be usable after the water recedes. People will evac to assembly areas, And then after that, they'll proceed to locations as high or higher than assembly areas, such as the new proposed fire station location, where the equipment will most likely be unhurt and undamaged from sand and salt water. Mr. Zimmerman did call me the other week. We had a very, very good phone call. I was very appreciative that he did call, and I would hope and I encourage anybody, if they have any questions or concerns, to call me, and I would love to help educate and gain understanding from anything you guys may have. I was glad that he did call me, had a great conversation. There are no further questions. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Josh, for
Thank you.
your thorough report. And perhaps that can go out on the blog or maybe even at Gerhart Firefighters Facebook.
Yeah. I'll send this just like every month to Christy, and she'll send it out to you guys, and she posts it with all the other report packets online for every council meeting. And we will be uploading all of my reports. That was brought up earlier tonight. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, that all of the reports will be on that news station discussion page that Councilor Warren set up for.
Thank you, Josh. Next up, City Treasurer, Ms. Justine.
Okay, so we wanted to give you just a brief summary of revenues and expenditures as they compared to last year at this time. So we're trying to compare the two, just looking back. Revenues, our general fund at this point, the beginning fund balance is higher than the previous fiscal year at this time. It's an increase of about 39%. In the process of working through bank reconciliations and reclassifying revenues, the beginning fund balance has seen an adjustment just from last month to this month. I don't anticipate any more adjustments for last fiscal year, but our auditors are coming in November, and so they can make adjustments and we can move things to different funds and more appropriately account for things. So there still could be some changes from last year's beginning fund balances, which are ending fund balances last year, beginning fund balances this year. Franchise fees are slightly higher than last year, but nothing significant. Business license revenue was up significantly compared to last year in this quarter. However, this may have a lot to do with just delayed business license payments weren't received due to COVID in last July, August, and September. They came in a little bit later because the majority of revenue was for already existing businesses. We haven't seen a huge number of new businesses opening in the last 3 months. Business, building and plumbing revenues are slightly lower than last year, but not substantial. They're just slightly lower. And overall, the general fund revenue markers indicate a similar revenue pattern as last year. In debt service, this year, there will be debt service revenue and debt service expenditures for the bond refinance. These transactions will what appear to inflate the overall revenue and expenditures report, but ultimately the transactions cross themselves out because we still, even though we don't really have that money, we still have got them a loan. You know, we refinance, we get the revenue, so it goes in revenue, and then we get the expense to pay off the refinance, and so we have to pay it out. So they cross each other out, but they are in our report. So they do inflate those numbers when you look at it. Water revenue is significantly higher compared to this year than last year. It's up about 35%. I have to give Christy kudos because she's done a really phenomenal job at organizing the water receipts collection process. She started last fiscal year and she really focused on outstanding water bills and monitoring issues and started implementing some procedures. And I really feel like that just moving forward with continuing a lot of her organizational and monitoring, that we'll be able to really strengthen that program and really start to see strong collections. Chad Christie and I will be going to work also in the water program. We're going to be reviewing the ordinances and exploring collection options, which could mean possibly collection companies and or water shut-off notices, which we want to follow the ordinances, and we want to make sure that whatever we do, we really communicate with the public, and so they're aware. So we don't want to just start scaring people and doing things that we should have been doing all along, but maybe weren't. So we want to make sure that we get some blogs out and some information before we make any substantial changes there. Comparing apples to apples and removing revenues such as the American Rescue Grant funds and the debt service revenue. First quarter remains stable and strong in the new fiscal year. My cautionary note to that is that last year was really unusual and may not have followed traditional revenue patterns, but I don't see anything that looks scary or threatening there. Expenditures, overall general fund expenditures seem in alignment with last year. They've increased, but anticipated areas such as liability insurance, salaries, and benefits. Annually, the city has liability insurance and workers' comp payments that we have to prepay in July. So those payments are always there and a little large. Due to our previous workers' compensation carrier no longer providing city coverage to any city, CIS isn't providing that. The city has a new provider with SAFE Corporation. The police department has reduced personnel service costs unintentionally due to their current vacancy. And the fire department has a slight increase in equipment purchases, but nothing significant. And some of the added expenses will be offset with the excess revenues from the conflag revenue. Line items have been added for the conflag expenses. Salary and expenses have been paid out on 4 fire deployments. Revenues have been submitted for reimbursement, but none have come in yet. Court expenses are down. However, there has been very minimal court activity, and the municipal judge hasn't even submitted an invoice this fiscal year. Planning expenses are higher, but there's been several projects that have required a little bit more attention and focus. Parks also has increased expenditures, but this is due to more appropriate distribution of public works personnel salary. We're more closely following the distribution that we have put in our budget. So it doesn't represent an increase in personnel. It's only just moving the way we distributed public works salary. Expenditures are approximately 15% higher compared to last fiscal year in the general fund. Debt services expenditures had a 2011 bond principal payment reversed because we had to make that payment in July before we had refinanced, and so they had sent it back. So we reversed the expenditure out of that fund. And then we have issuance and escrow costs in there too for the refinance. Water fund expense seems to be in anticipated levels, except we are missing in the current projections report a water bill for the month of September for Warrenton, because we purchase water, and it happens to be very substantial. I think it's about $109,000. So we have called them. We've gotten that paid, so you'll see it jump substantially in October. But we had paid it last year in September, so nothing there will be unusual. There is a notable expenditure for the implementation of a supervisory control and data acquisition upgrade for the water system that we've start making a partial payment on. The road district has had some summer work expenditures, and there's been 4 different paving projects that they've paid out of the road district. The building reserve expenditure continues to have expenses for the fire and police station relocation. They include things like architecture, engineering, and legal services. And at this point, there doesn't seem to be any warning flags for revenues and expenditures this year so far. I did want to just briefly talk about this month, things in particular. Just a reminder, until the final audit, we do move things around to better fit where they should go with the auditor's help. And so those numbers could change. Total income and expenses appear extraordinarily high on the monthly revenue and expenditure report. But again, just remember the bond refinance revenues, and then they're also higher in the expenditures. In expenses, the payroll processing fee for QuickBooks had been put in, which I think Councilor Warren had noted last month. So I've transferred those expenditures into there. That's $10.99. There was an annual renew of the city short-term rental software that was charged to $10.47. That's an annual software we usually buy, but it's expensive. A voided check is in this, that we voided this year, that was written last year for court witness fee that the person never cashed. I've tried to reach them, but were unable to. So there is a negative expenditure in 1549. So if you're wondering how we wrote a negative check, we actually didn't. We just voided one. And the water software upgrade was charged in 3083. So that line item went up substantially this month. And that's my report.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Justine from the council?
No questions. Thank you, Justine.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Watts, do you have a report?
Yes. So I was in court earlier this month. I think, as the mayor noted, we received a ruling in that case last Friday. The practical effect was that the ballot title that I had written remains. The other practical effect is we're not on the ballot in November. We'll need to submit a new ballot title for the May election, and that'll happen after sometime, probably February or March. The reason I wanted to proceed with the court case is I felt like it was important to get a judgment on a ballot title, which perhaps could make the next ballot title less likely to be challenged since it's already been upheld by the judge once. So that's why I did that. We have a court date coming up in early November, I believe November 6th. That is in the US Bank v. Shannon Smith case. The attorneys representing the lender are going for summary judgment, which is interesting because they did only record their mortgage on one half of the property. So very unique case, very unique circumstances. Additionally, since our last meeting, we had the US Census reports come out. I've been, for several years, been saying that I thought that Portland State's estimates were too low, and Dan Jesse usually nods his head when I say it. So, but I realized we wouldn't get the true up until the US Census came out. They had predicted that our growth over the past 10 years, they being Portland State, was 5.6%. It actually came in at 22.6%. So they had said we'd have a population of 1545. Our actual was 1793. That trend was throughout the county. Every city in the county, with the exception of Cannon Beach, had a growth rate that was between 3x and 6x of what Portland State had predicted. So Astoria, they had a predicted growth of 2.1%. It came in at 7.4%. Warrenton, they were at 7.2. The actual was 25.8. They had us at 5.6, actual 22.6. Seaside at 1.7, the actual is 10.2. That's 6 times the predicted growth. And then we had Cannon Beach actually had negative population growth, I think because more and more of their housing is becoming vacation housing and less of their housing is by people that live and work on the northern Oregon coast. Tillamook, Portland State had predicted a negative growth rate, and they were actually at 5.4%, and that's the city of Tillamook, not Tillamook County. The practical impact of this is that about a year or two ago, we went through a buildable lands inventory housing needs analysis. That look back and look forward was done using Portland State's population estimates. And then the look forward was used using Portland State's population estimates. And so I don't know that we'll be able to use any of that. And I think we're probably going to have to go through that process again, because the discrepancy between what was projected looking back and what actually happened is so great in this county. I sent a email to Senator Johnson, not last Friday, not last Thursday, but the Thursday before, I think was the date. I got a call from her the following day. We had a very good conversation. She understands the impact of this. Additionally, the Portland State population estimates are used in order to allocate shared state funds, as well as the Federal CARES Act and other dollars. So having communities where the population has been underestimated does certainly negatively impact our ability to receive funds. I've looked at a couple of counties to see what the trends were in those counties. The only city I found thus far where Portland State, I'd say, well, in the Tri-County area, there were 4 cities that they overestimated population. Portland by around 12,000, Beaverton, Banks, and Barlow, which I didn't even know was a city actually until this came out. But it turns out they have 153 people, and Portland State thought they had 155. So it looks like some pretty significant population estimates. And again, that impacts state shared revenues such as lottery funds, those sort of things, as well as the federal funds and our land use, making sure that we have an adequate buildable land inventory. Exactly what's going to happen from that, I think after talking to Senator Johnson, there are probably going to be more conversations. That this issue absolutely resonated with her. And I know from experience that when Senator Johnson is paying attention to an issue, that things usually happen. She's one of those people that's able to kind of bring about some change. So hopefully we'll have conversations going forward. I think Chad and I are probably going to, there's a city manager meeting coming up this month that I think I'll probably be on the agenda too, because I want all the cities to understand both kind of the short and long terms associated with this. And I hope that going forward, that the numbers that we get in the form of estimates are more realistic. A lot of people saw this. I think a lot of people thought that there was an undercount, and there was. I think when I compared to what happened to our buildable lands inventory, when we actually looked at it on a parcel by parcel basis and eliminated almost half of what had been calculated, I would hope that other cities in the county would do the same, because they're looking at all of the cities and all the cities' population in order to make these decisions citywide instead of on a micro basis. And so the fact that all these cities are growing at 3x to 6x absolutely matters for all of us when it comes to making sure there's an adequate supply of buildable land. And we're in a housing crisis, and this helps explain why, I think. Other than that, I think that, things have been going fairly well from a legal front. As far as advocacy around an issue, whether it would be a fire station or anything else, if it's been turned into the clerk, there are no limitations to what an elected official can say. So if in fact we were going to be on the November ballot, which we aren't, then Chad and I and all the quote unquote city staff would need to be careful about what we said, and to make sure that we weren't using our we weren't engaging in advocacy using our positions. Because we're not on the ballot in November, those rules don't apply. The good news for you as city councilors, as elected officials, is those rules never apply to you, because you're elected officials, you're expected to engage in elections related advocacy, and there are no prohibitions on it other than you can't use city staff in order to help you engage in that during that very limited period from when we turn it in to the county clerk and are on the ballot to the election. So we're not in that period now because we're not going to be on the November ballot. So that's all I've got. If anyone has any questions, I can answer them.
I have a question. Peter, what is to stop the spoilers in May from filing at the very last minute a challenge to the ballot title, even though we've gotten it cleared, and them delaying it again beyond the acceptance date?
Right. Well, I think the good news is that Judge Peters, so elections ballot title challenges are actually quite rare. There are a lot of city attorneys that have never handled one. I've handled a number of them because I do elections work in cities that I'm not their city attorney, but they bring me in to do elections work. But judges almost never see them. So Judge Peterson hadn't had one before. Now he's familiar with the process. He's familiar with the timelines and how it works. And he will know and that he has already validated the question and summary and caption, because I told him that I would use whatever he determined. Well, he determined my ballot title. So I think if they were to challenge it again, I do not think he would view that favorably at all. I think quite the opposite. So I don't think that they'll have that ability.
All right, thank you.
Peter, I have a couple of questions. So first, the challenge to the ballot title, do you have an estimate of how much time and expense the city incurred because of that?
No, but
just on your...
I can get you that information. I mean, I guess the good news for you guys is that for city ballot titles, I've probably done about as many as anyone. So I'm very familiar with the law and can pull that out of other pleadings. But, you know, it takes time because I'm having to unpack their arguments and figure out what they are. I'm having to figure out how to message it to the judge. I'm having to prepare for oral argument because I prepare for everything. So this was, in my mind, a very unfortunate ballot title challenge because what was challenged, so the use of words like preliminary, that is what I would term boilerplate that would appear in any preliminary report would say we can't rely on it because it's preliminary in nature. To the extent that an engineer is relying on another engineer's materials or prior engineering studies that had come before them, they will always say that we can't rely on it because they didn't do that work themselves. Now, I've never seen it where it didn't turn out that it was the case, but those sort of words would be in a ballot title. And I think that there is a growing amount of what I would term misinformation in every city that I represent. I got a call today from a lawyer about ducks. I'm not talking about like the Oregon Ducks football team. I'm talking about actual birds. And, it's information about streets that have never been planned. And we had a mayor whose house got spray painted to stop a street that hadn't been planned yet. I mean, we don't know where a street will be, but his house got spray painted. And I just see that, I see kind of this environment of people selectively using information or people not understanding information and then spreading it online in a manner that creates a lot of problems for cities and for elected officials. And correcting the record on stuff is really hard. And so what I would say as a city attorney is I view my job as calling balls and strikes. I mean, you guys are the ones that set the vision and values for the city. I try and carry those out. I take the neutrality requirements for anything elections law related very, very seriously. Anything I put out elections related, I'm going to try and make it as neutral as possible because I view my role as educating voters so they can make an informed decision. But in how they come down on the decision is their own business. As long as they understand it, then I've done my job. But if I'm looking at this transaction, what happened, how I view it is I found an Oregon administrator. I mean, we were looking at $3 to $4 million for that High Point site and 2 lawsuits. And, you know, I've known John Carr for my entire life. When he said, I'm sorry, but we're going to sue, he's not lying to me. You know, I view it as we found this little used Oregon administrative rule. Using our BLI and HNA, we were able to see that we had UGB that we would never be able to use. And we came up with a really creative way, in my mind, of getting a free site for a fire station and a free site for a park. The developers the developers view it as a positive thing for them. They view it as amenities. The street to the south was a little bit nervous, and that's why we're putting that park there so that they know they don't have to worry about a through street. And I really had thought this would be kind of a rally around the flag issue, and everyone would be kind of proud of the city for coming up with a really creative solution to what seemed to be a big problem. I mean, this was a parcel that Councillor Smith had identified a number of years ago, but based on what we knew then about our housing needs analysis and BLI, we weren't going to be able to get a UGB expansion. But we found this tool, we used it. And so to have it, you know, to be getting calls from lawyers saying, well, why aren't you purchasing another site? And I'm like, well, why would we buy a site if we can get one for free that's at a higher elevation? And so to me, it really was, I think if people actually understand what we were trying to accomplish and what we've done, I guess it's really surprising that we would get this sort of opposition to that site. Now, whether or not the fire station, they get bonds for a fire station to be built, that's a completely different question. But as far as like all of the goals that you as the council had done around resiliency and keeping people safe and keeping our volunteers safe and all those things, you know, it would be difficult to find, in my mind, a better site than the one that we found. And we're certainly not going to get a site at a better cost than $0. So I guess sometimes I know things are going to kind of turn into an issue in Gearhart. I can kind of see it coming down the tracks, but I really didn't see this one. And maybe that's on me, but you know, I just did not think that we would have this, so many people that seem so distressed about what, from a topographic standpoint, is a very safe site. So it's disappointing for me. And I usually don't talk about my feelings, but I will be happy, and it's kind of sad that they're not.
Thank you, Peter. I had one more follow-up question. So if we are successful in expanding urban growth boundary, and if we are successful bringing this into the city of Gearhart, does the additional housing there help our available lands inventory, at least over the short term?
Over the very short term, it would. Again, we're talking about more than 4x growth in Gearhart compared to what was measured by PSU at the time that they did their housing needs analysis. So this is a trade, it's not an expansion, so we're not gaining any net UGB. As far as where would we expand, part of the problem is the areas outside of our urban growth boundary are already at kind of more urban levels of density. So I don't know exactly where we're going to find all the lots. What I would hope is that cities like Warrenton that really would like a UGB expansion, that think they have land, that they would be able to use these new numbers in order to expand what they have. The same for Astoria. You know, there's some topographic challenges to us going east. There are not a lot of easy answers, but it will be nice to bring some more inventory online. And to the extent we can, expand somewhere else, I think that obviously we'll be looking at that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And Chad, City Administrator report, you had one in our packet.
I did, and I'll briefly go over just a couple of those things, Madam Mayor and Council. As my team has already provided an incredible amount of information, I'm very proud of the work that they're doing and appreciate the transparency. I did misinform you earlier. We actually have almost 1,500 people on our blog. Christy looked that up in a way that I didn't and saw that. So that is going fairly well, but we could use quite a few more, especially knowing that our new census is somewhere near 1793. That would be a great goal. Building department, I'm working through negotiating a new agreement with the building department. Once I get through the negotiation process, this is something I'll bring to the council for more discussion. We're also looking at getting rid of hopefully that building lease and that little building outside the city of Gearhart here soon with some of the changes that we're going to be making. I'll report that as that comes closer. Code enforcement's been really kind of easygoing. We had a few reports of tree cutting that we followed up on, and no violations occurred. But again, Planning Commissioner Sharon Klopfer's got some concerns. That letter is in the councilor packet, and I'm sure that that's going to be some discussions in the future. Public Works, we just had the one water main break. They've been doing a lot of different work, but one of the significant items was a water main break on H Street. It just caused a bit of an inconvenience for a short period of time, but they got on it very quickly, and I was happy with their work. As far as our interview process with the fire chief position, it looks like the interviews with the top 3 candidates are set to occur October 28th. Which will be a panel interview process on that date. And then, similar to what Chief Bowman was talking about in regards to making an offer to whoever it is that the council chooses, we could be looking at that at the November 3rd meeting, or we may piggyback that on to the same date that Chief Bowman is looking at on the 17th. And I'll have some more to report on that here soon as well. Vacation rentals, we have 3 that have sold, 73 active, so we're slowly coming down. Of note, the emergency cash program, we're going to have another access date on October 23rd at 10 a.m. at the fire department. So if you would like to store some items off-site and out of the tsunami inundation zone, please look us up on that program, and we will provide you with a lot of good information and the ability to store some goods in case of an emergency. Ken Schonkweiler with Oregon Department of Transportation is going to give an update on the Highway 101 corridor project in November, the November meeting. So look forward to that. We reported that the ridge path is 95% done, but actually at this point, it is the construction period of that anyway, and the gravel on the path, it is 100% done. The Public Works Department and some volunteers have done a lot of work on that. We just finished the grading onto the bridge between 8th and 10th. I suggest everybody walk it and kind of get an idea of what that's all about. To move forward, I think, we'll be planning on a dedication of that bridge. And then also before that, we're looking at some signage that will work and fit within our community. And we are contacting some people who make some very nice signage that will help guide people along the path. Elk Collaborative update, all the stakeholders signed the Declaration of Cooperation last month. Now the task for the city of Gearhart is to begin looking at some of the recommendations and deciding what it is that we can do to help in that situation. So the majority part of the work is yet to be done. Playground equipment, as Mayor had already discussed, we were looking at some new designs. We received a quote on a new design from a company called Compan from Highwire. It's some very nice wooden material. The quote came in a little higher than we wanted to, but that's a good place to start, and we'll be able to pare that down and take a look at that as a possibility. But yet we've also, with the help of the mayor and George Van Humiston, we found another company as well called Backyard Fun Factory. And so we've reached out to them and are going to get some quotes as well, but we're getting closer to that. Fire station update we'll discuss a little bit later. Of note, we have the contractors work hours ordinance public hearing on October 12th at 6 p.m. We have an upcoming work session on November 30th at 6:30 p.m. The tentative agenda was to discuss fireworks, the city charter, and council goals, to go over some of those again, kind of in a summary fashion. Coming up October 21st is the Great Oregon Shakeout. So the city's going to be preparing in that. And that is something that across Oregon, a lot of communities are going through a scenario with an earthquake in their region, potentially tsunami. We're going to be participating in that. So on October 21st at 10:21 a.m., we will be having people at the assembly areas. We hope that residents will actually go to their assembly points nearest to where they're located. They'll be able to meet some of the firefighters that are up there and the vehicles that we have. And then they'll also have some CERT members assisting with that as well, maybe with some radio work. The city is going to conduct a tabletop exercise based on the new location of the fire station, just to kind of hash some things out about how that's going to work. And afterwards, hot dogs at the fire station and kind of an open house at the fire station as it is now. So keep an eye on the blog for that, and we will advertise all that information in times. That's all that I have for now.
The tabletop drill that you're going to do, is that going to be concurrent at 10:21?
No, we're going to do it at a different time to be scheduled, and we'll do that here within staff in this room. But we wanted to concentrate on what was going on outside with people and participate with that. And there's going to be hot dogs. We don't want to miss out on hot dogs.
Thank you very much. We have a packet of correspondence.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a couple of questions?
Go ahead.
So, Chad, we had a committee of Carrie Smith, Paulina Cochran, a rank and file volunteer, and yourself as the selection committee. Have you guys met yet? And who was that rank and file person that you've selected to be on that?
Is this in regards to the fire chief?
Yeah, fire chief. Sorry, I
No worries.
meant to say that.
Those two counselors, Carrie and Paulina, had volunteered for that. There is a rank and file selection. I had two people that were interested, and I notified them of the dates to make sure that they can clear that. Other people that will be involved is some of the firefighters within our current fire department and some firefighters from outside of our fire department. At least one chief will be there as well, and they'll be able to ask questions of our staff. We haven't met yet. We're just putting together some of the final details, and then we'll discuss that with the people in participation in advance of the 28th.
Okay, great. Excellent. And could you give us an update on city staff vaccination rates?
I don't have all the information in front of me as far as city staff. The majority of city staff is vaccinated. And in regards to the fire department, a majority of firefighters are also vaccinated. We have the deadline of October 18th pending for firefighters in Oregon, and it's the mandate to where firefighters that are going to respond have to be vaccinated. And I believe right now, as of today, we're probably about 75 to 78% vaccinated, which takes care of the majority of our fire department. Some folks that have chosen not to be vaccinated are those that don't respond usually as well. So I don't think that the fire department is in any type of crisis at all. We're going to be able to maintain our level of service with the public.
Thank you. Excellent news.
Any other questions for Chad? So in the packets, there was correspondence, a variety of letters that came in. I do just have one comment with regard to Sharon Clopper's request for a tree board. I believe Councillor Fackrell has brought that up in the past as well as part of a Tree City initiative. Perhaps we can give that consideration when we meet in November to update our goals list and review our goals list. And we also, if we get completed with the parks master plan, that as it sits now also has a commission to assist the city in development of parklands and the management of them. And I'm hoping perhaps that those two functions of parks and trees might be able to be brought together as one. Maybe that's getting too far ahead, but just keep thinking about that and we'll talk about it more in November. Any other comments from correspondence? And there was also one we got late from the Department of the Navy.
I had a question, and it's probably best addressed by Peter Watts. There are a couple of what's probably best to term zombie issues that just won't die regarding conflicts of interest. One of them, I am a party to some allegations. And one that's been on social media for some time, and it has taken a resurgence in the last couple of weeks, is the allegation that Chad has a conflict of interest being the city administrator and a volunteer for the Gerhardt Volunteer Fire Department. So, Peter, could you once and for all review the criteria for creating a conflict of interest, and maybe we can drive a stake in the heart of the zombie or whatever?
Right. So if you have a conflict of interest, almost invariably is something that financially benefits you as a counselor. So I believe the allegation that has been made about you is that, and the noise ordinance is that your spouse has some strong beliefs. So your spouse beliefs don't really matter for the purposes of how you vote. I mean, you are the counselor, she's not the counselor. There is no financial gain to you in having a noise ordinance. The noise ordinance applies citywide. For citywide programs, it would be almost impossible for any of you to have a conflict of interest because that citywide policy impacts everyone in the city. So, you know, we could have a scenario where you guys vote to have a sidewalk infill program, and then as part of that, you would decide where the infill would be. Let's say you didn't have a sidewalk in front of your house, you could still vote for the sidewalk infill program. If then it came time that your house, the sidewalk in front of your house or on your street was proposed, it would be a good idea for you to recuse yourself from that, because that would be of benefit, arguably of benefit to you. Anytime that there is a claim of conflict, I mean, the body to go to really is the Oregon Governmental Ethics Commission. I've taken enough questions to them that I have a pretty good idea about how they'll rule on something, though, you know, I guess we could all be surprised as far as whether being a volunteer anything, whether it's you being on CERT or Chad being a volunteer firefighter or anyone else on council being a volunteer firefighter. I don't see how that could be a conflict. I mean, Chad's not a voting member of the council, so he doesn't get to determine how what council codes are going to be put into effect or how the budget is spent. You guys as the council are the ones that make that decision. So I can't imagine how him being city administrator and a volunteer firefighter would be any sort of conflict. But I guess in order to finally make these things go to bed, it's probably a good idea to go to the OGC and get a written determination, and then we can post it on the website and people can see. But again, that for conflicts of interest, they almost always have to involve money or potential conflict of interest. Like if you had an asphalt paving company that regularly did bids for city contracts, and the council was deciding that you couldn't use concrete anymore, you had to use asphalt around the city. That's the sort of thing that probably is a good idea, even though it's just potential, probably a good idea for you to, disclose. And then you don't have to recuse yourself, but you can, you don't have to. And so that's that sort of thing. That's how we look at conflicts. But unless you're voting on something that's to your spouse's financial benefit, then what your spouse believes doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters to you, obviously, but it doesn't matter. It wouldn't matter for the purposes of you.
Right. Okay. Well, that's my understanding as well. I've read everything that there is on conflict and potential conflict. So, and so on Chad, if he were a fire truck salesperson on the side and we bought fire trucks from him, that potentially could be a conflict, but that's not what he does. He volunteers his time to save citizens of Gerhardt and our surrounding area. So
yeah, again,
I'm just not seeing that.
Conflicts of interest are for the elected officials. Now, if I was representing a private party in the city of Gerhardt while simultaneously representing the city of Gerhardt, it would make the negotiation really short. But my issue wouldn't be with the OGC; it would be the Oregon State Bar, coming in to punish.
Right.
Suspension. Yeah. It wouldn't be a government ethics issue. It would be a legal ethics state bar issue.
Yeah, bar association.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And we're at our visitors section. We have 2 items in the agenda, and then we'll open it up to those who are watching and listening. The first item is the letter we received from the Astoria chapter of the DAR, wishing us to proclaim a week actually in the past, September 17th to 23rd, as Constitution Week. And and that is the 66th anniversary of Constitution Week Proclamation 2021. If we could have a motion to approve this proclamation. Brent, you're muted.
Yes, I realized that a little late. I move that we adopt the proclamation for the 66th anniversary of the Constitution Week.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? And so Nina Walker, the Secretary of the Astoria chapter of the DAR, is listening. The proclamation has been approved. Second, we had a letter from the harbor asking us to proclaim October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month for October 2021. Do we have a motion to approve that proclamation?
I move that we read and adopt the enclosed proclamation via signature to support Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. And Christy, can you check and see if anyone has emailed in to speak during our visitor section?
I can't really check actually because they would email Chad.
Thank you. He's checking.
I can call names though if you'd like, or if anybody would like to use the raise the hand feature.
There is no emails from me.
We will just have people, if you want to raise your hand for Christy, she will call on you.
No hands.
There's
And
one
another-
for Robert Maury on my screen.
That's strange. I don't see it on mine. Can you guys see it in the council chambers?
No.
No. Can we see him?
Well,
Oh, there he is.
Mr. Moore, if you'd like to speak, you have the floor.
Okay. Hey, thank you, everybody, and thank you for your time this evening, and it's been a pleasure listening to you. Just a quick update on what's going on at the school. I think you can see we've done a pretty much all of the cleaning up we're going to do this year, painting, etc. We had DEQ review our 11 test pits. That review has meant that we have to do photometer testing this winter. We have 13 photometers test sites being set up. Next week, they'll be monitored from the 1st of November till the end of April next year. I'd expect we'll get some feedback from DEQ by possibly as early as the end of June next year. So until we have that feedback from DEQ, we really can't do anything else in terms of any planning on what we can do on the site. So if that gives you some idea of our plan for the future, thank you. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you for that update. Much appreciated. Any questions for Mr.
Yeah, I don't have any
Moore?
questions, but I don't have any questions for Mr. Maury, and I already communicated this when I bumped into him on the street. I think the school looks a whole lot better now than it did when he bought it. So thank you. It's a huge improvement for the community.
Thank you.
And there probably is not a hand function for the caller with the area code 303. So I'm just gonna ask if you would like to speak.
I believe that's Sharon Klopfer.
Yeah. If you would want to speak, go ahead and do that now. Okay. Seeing none, we're gonna move on. Old business. Fire and police station update.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. A lot of what I was going to talk about has already been discussed under Peter Watt's report, but I do want to have an opportunity after this to make sure that any questions about the land swap or the UGB expansion is an opportunity for you to ask questions about Peter and I now that we're here and we have some concern about that. But I've just got a few other things to update. Councillor Smith, your concern about the possible ballot title challenge for the next election cycle. I've been studying the May election calendar for 2022. We've been preparing a timeline for how that is going to work. And this next opportunity for us to file the ballot title will be done as soon as possible. And we can begin that process and have it finished with time to spare is our goal. So we've been looking at that. The other question, in regards to this, as far as some of the costs that were incurred by this delay, some of the other costs that potentially could be in there is the possible increase in bond rates from November, now pushing it forward another 5 or 6 months. The bond rates could increase. Hopefully they will decrease, but we'll see what the market will bear at that. And building costs, every year that we're delayed, we're estimating over $600,000 to $700,000 in increased costs due to building materials costs and labor costs. And we hope that that isn't the case. We're working on a new estimate with some estimating companies based on a new timeline, and we'll be able to report that here soon as well. But we're looking at the May election for 2022, which would be Tuesday, May 17th. We'll be discussing next month with the council on officially moving forward with that or not. And we have, again, our eyeballs on the last day to file for the ballot title, and we'll be well before that. Some of the other things we're doing is I'm meeting with Scott Freakinisi and Associates this week. And this is to discuss the UGB report draft that they have been working on. They're also going to report on the tasks and timelines for this process, as we need to get it started as soon as possible. And other things we've been working on with them is providing them with all of the GIS and mapping information for the area and Gearhart, so that they can put together some the data for the UGB swap. And we'll also be looking at, and is what Peter Watts was talking about, is how does this change in the census affect this process? And if there's any questions about that, again, I think Peter's answered most of those. But in regards to the process for the UGB swap, does anybody have any questions about that? Hearing none, it sounds like Peter covered most of that. At this point, this is the update that I have for the fire station process. I do appreciate Councillor Warren putting together the site on Facebook for some good conversation. It's already started. We have over 100 members on that site now, and there's been some great conversation and questions and answers on that, and people participating in large part, very positive way. After that, that's all that I have to update on the fire station at this moment.
Okay. And our last piece of business then is a discussion about the Gearhart zip code. And Councillor Warren, do you want to take this up?
Sure. Well, ever since moving to Gearhart in 2018, I have heard from many, many sources that not having a zip code in Gearhart is irksome and causes issues, including from Karen, our postmistress, and I see that she's on the call. I would ask if she would care to speak. I would like for her to comment on what it means to her. Karen, would you like to do that or not? Sorry to put you on the spot. Oh,
Yes.
she's raising her hand. Yay.
Karen, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and you have the floor.
She unmuted us.
Yeah, Karen, you're still muted. So try to find your mute button.
Should look like a microphone.
Yeah, an old-fashioned microphone. Probably down at the bottom of your screen.
I think she's got it. Oop, that was it.
Almost. Try it one more time, Karen. There you go. We should be able to hear you. Why don't you just
I think she's
say hi?
she's connecting again at the moment.
When she joined the meeting, it was doing that
Oh, okay.
connecting to audio nonstop where I think it was giving her some trouble.
Oh, okay. So anyhow, in the meantime, I talked to a number of people, got pieces of information, research that others have done. I compiled it. It makes so much sense to me to get our own zip code. I've heard issues that we don't have enough people to have our own zip code. However, if you'll look on the Exhibit A on the back of the resolution, you'll see that all the coastal cities within 25 miles of Seaside, many of them have far fewer citizens than Gerhardt does, and they have their own zip code. So that should not be a legitimate reason for banning us from having our own zip code. And once we have a resolution saying that this is what the city of Gerhardt wants, then we can use that to garner support from our federal elected officials. So Representative Suzanne Bonamici, Senators Wyden and Merkley, and then make the case to the regional USPS representative and make the request formal, and they're supposed to do an analysis and respond within a fixed period of time. So I realize people may raise issues like, well, gee, what does this do to stationery and things like that? But usually there's a transition period that you can use your old stationery and use, the formerly correct but now incorrect zip code. You use up the stationery and print new, or like most businesses, nobody has stationery anymore. It's all printed as needed with a laser printer. So I can't see the downside to this. So I would ask that we adopt the resolution and get going on it.
Well, it's a draft resolution, so don't we need to instruct to have a real resolution written so it comes up and it's numbered and then we can adopt it?
Well, yeah, we could do that, or we could write a number in it now, or we could, I did think of one more thing to add, but
So Brenda, I
whatever you
have a
would like to
question.
do.
Okay.
But I'm really sorry that Karen isn't on this call, because she could answer it, but you might know the answer. If we do indeed get a change where we do have our own zip code, will the Gerhardt Post Office no longer be a contract post office, will it be an actual USPS official post office?
No,
Do you know the answer?
Yeah. I think I do. And I would like Karen to be the definitive answer, but many of the post office on here are contract stations,
Okay,
and they have their own zip code.
okay, thank
So
you.
those two are independent, unrelated issues as far as I know.
Thank you, Brent.
And Counselor Warren, it looks like Peter Watts had raised his hand.
We can't do
Oh,
this.
Yeah, so we have a couple more meetings this month. We can certainly bring something substantially similar but official to one of those and get it on an agenda. I do have some experience with this issue. And there is a grace period when both addresses work. My experience has been having the specificity of your own of your own versus Seaside is that it makes it easier for first responders, and it makes it easier for the postal team too, because it's not unusual for cities to have similar streets, and it can make more work for the team at the post office to not have the more specific information.
yes, that is described in the resolution to avoid confusion for duplicate street names. Numbered streets, lettered streets are especially troublesome. There are a couple of other streets with similar names in Gerhardt and Seaside. So, and it creates delays in the mail. And obviously when things are misdirected, they have to be fixed and researched. And so that's problematic. Karen, you still can't get your microphone.
So if we have a consensus to send staff on its way to giving us a formal resolution, that would be good. And we could get that sometime this month in one of our next meetings.
Yes.
Okay, that fantastic.
I concur with the new zip code.
Great.
Dan, do you want to talk about that a little more?
I guess as someone that's lived in both cities with the same zip code, I can't say that I've ever had any concern about the fact that it was two cities in one zip code. The idea of saying that, you know, one has to redo letterhead and business cards and you know, licenses and things, and have those changed to a different zip code, that is a burden for people, whether it's business people or I suppose, you know, non-business people. I think there's a burden there. From my point of view, this has been this way since the beginning of mail in our region, and if the system isn't broken, don't fix it.
Actually, I think we did have our own zip code at one time.
Yeah, we did have a zip code at one time. That's what I have heard from multiple sources. And Dan, I beg to differ. The system is broken. There are issues that are derived from not having our own zip code, and a lot of national online vendors use the U.S. Postal Service national database. And when you put in the zip code, it defaults the city and you can't override it. Yeah.
I can't argue that, but the package still gets to you. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you say you're in Seaside or Gerhardt, I mean, that's kind of the joke in the area. We're in essence the same community in many ways.
Well, I've spoken with many people that don't agree with that that things do get lost and end up on the wrong doorstep. And that's what started me researching the process that I since passed on to Brent. There were complaints since I've been there.
And I've had a hard time, not a really hard time, but if I'm ordering online and I give my zip code and I say Gearhart, and they, on the other end of the line, they say, no, it's Seaside, and you have to say no, and you have to explain the whole thing. So I want to thank Councillor Warren for his work in this. And I would like to go ahead with the resolution when it's ready.
Do we have a consensus then?
Yeah, I think we
Terrific.
have a majority of the council, and what the city staff will do, Madam Mayor, is we'll look at this draft resolution again, work with Councillor Warren. We would be happy to take any information or questions or concerns from the councilors, just email us. And then I'll also bring this to the staff in regards to what some of their concerns may be, whether it be police, fire, or such, so.
And maybe next meeting, Karen can be a special guest speaker.
Right. Absolutely. Karen, you have the floor when you can get that working. We'd love to hear what your perspective is.
I'd go to the post office.
Tonight we have no new business, so we have council concerns. Rita, go ahead if you would.
Well, I had a concern earlier, but I don't anymore because I forgot. So hopefully next meeting I'll remember what it was, but thank you.
Councilor Rita, this is Chad. I think you were talking about the Navy correspondence.
Oh, that's right. Thank you so much, Chad. It was in regard to the letter from the Navy, and they had talked about using explosives and trying to save the environment, to be really, they articulated that they didn't want to harm anything. And so I went on their website to find out exactly how far from Gearhart these operations would commence. And I could find no location map or any indication of where they would be using these explosives. So I did talk to Chad about it, and I did express that I wanted to talk about it. Thank you, Chad.
Of course.
Brent?
I had a couple, but I think we've already addressed it, the conflicts of interest and the fire chief hiring process. So we've already discussed it. So I think that's about it. I did read that the Air National Guard is going to be conducting F-15 flights tonight until 10 o'clock. So there could be, well, lots of extra jet noise tonight.
It was happening earlier.
Yeah, already happened, some of it did.
Anything else? Brent
That's it for me.
and Dan, Jesse?
So I think the zip code thing, it occurred to me, I didn't think of this as I had the floor before, but we have a very big disconnect in this community between those that get serviced by Seaside Mail and those that get serviced by the Gearhart Post Office.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is something that needs to be considered when we're doing this. You have the people, which there are of the five, or the mayor and four councilors. I believe I'm the only one that's serviced by Seaside. So I automatically, my mail is delivered to my home, my packages are delivered to my home. If I have to get something that isn't delivered, I have to go to Seaside to get it. I don't deal with Gearhart whatsoever in that regard. It's a Seaside scenario. And I think there's a very large populace in this community that are like myself. That we, and this is something that I think is forgotten many times with discussions, there's the Gearhart core, which is very different than the population center of Gearhart, if you will, which is predominantly east. And so I think that's something that needs to be discussed and thought about. and how it affects a large portion of our population in a good or bad way may be very different than how it affects the Gerhart Core people.
Well, I can tell you that living on F Street, I'm served by the Seaside post office. I get my mail delivered at home. And I'd still be willing to put up with a little problem to have my own zip code. I just had mail returned from a insurance company that we've been using for 10 years. And on the envelope, it said undeliverable to this address. And it's been 10 years and we've used the same address with this insurance company, and there was an issue with the zip code and the city being different than the zip code comes up. So I'm all for the new zip if we can get it.
I apologize, Carrie. I didn't realize that the post office delivered to that portion of the community. So I was misinformed.
Yeah, I think Karen will be able to answer any questions that we have next meeting.
Okay, and Carrie, did you have any other council concerns?
Not at this moment, thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second,
I'll second that.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.